Okay, great. And Flip, I am going to give you host.
Great.
All right. Have a great meeting, y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Deb.
Bye-bye.
Right, let's call this meeting to order. Dr. Herndon, can we put the agenda back up real quick?
Yeah, let me get to share screen. So I usually have it on my, I have two laptops. I have the one on here, and then I have my side one so that I can always just see one thing or the other. But I will pull this up so we can share screen. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so we'll go ahead and call this December 4th special Saturday board meeting to order. All board directors are present, and I want to welcome, it looks like we have a couple guests this morning, so welcome to the guests. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. So can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Agenda is approved, and we'll go ahead and move on to the discussion items. So the first item is the school improvement plan. So welcome to Mr. Christopher.
How's it going? All right, let's see. Let me go and get my computer working here. Get to the right, get my mouse to go where I want it to. And you probably need me to share some screen, or do you have a copy of my PowerPoint, or do you want me to go ahead and put it up?
I've got it here. I can click on it here.
Okay. Awesome. You can just go to slide 2. There you go. All right. Well, thank you for letting me join you today. I thought I'd start with some celebrations as far as where we are this year. It's been a very interesting year, as I'm sure you well know, but we are really excited about a few things. One is just kind of a rebuilding of a culture of literacy, and we really have made a focus on getting kids reading again. I know that during the closure, our librarian worked really hard to try to keep kids connected with print material. Fortunately, we were able to get Kindles and things in hands of kids, so they had access to large libraries when they were out. But we were able to use some of our funding to increase our classroom libraries a bit, so that at the start of the year, kids were able to get a lot of independent reading materials. And one of the things that we worked with our library media specialist was changing the library from the old Dewey Decimal System to more of a genre-based setup, so it's easier for kids to find the books that interest them the most. And then we do advisory every day, and we have for a while, but we did a couple of things. We moved it to the beginning of the day, and then we set aside 2 days as protected reading time, so that we're getting all the scholars, focused on reading their own independent book during that time. And just overall trying to promote reading across in all the classrooms. Matter of fact, I know that before we go out on winter break, our Miss Hamilton's going to be working with a couple of our social studies folks on a reading unit. They're going to cross over into social studies and really do some reading instruction through social studies. So I'm excited about that push. Social emotional supports in place this year for both staff and students is huge. And I do really want to acknowledge the work of the folks at the central office to support us in that. Ted with the bringing in Ruler for us, and then also just working with Veronica and other folks to let us have a social worker We picked Marlisha Cox up as a social worker last year in the spring, but funding's allowed us to keep her, and did we ever need that? So we have been building the ruler pieces. We've done training with the staff, and then we're building pieces into the homeroom lessons. And then we've been continuing our work with circles. As an admin team, we meet, and we have we have not a monthly, but kind of like a bi-monthly circle time for our admin team. But then we also have been using circle with the staff at our last full Smart Wednesday. We had our partners in to do a circle piece where we basically broke the staff out into some groups so we could find out where everyone was and what they needed. And that was huge, and got some great feedback, and actually changing some of the things we're doing at the building level with staff to support that. And then teachers are using circle in the classroom as well to start class. We have different levels of skill as far as circle keeping, because we've got a lot of new staff, but and it's a great tool for kids to connect. As the next piece was the social emotional support team, our student support team. We made a shift away from how we used to do discipline before the pandemic, but having this in place this year has been huge. We have a social emotional intervention specialist. That's Miss Tomaselli, Nicole Tomaselli. She was at the high school. She's working at Showalter this year. She's also interning with me. And then we have a student support and re-engagement, ESP. And Mr. Williams, he's a former former Showalter student, which is kind of nice again. And he's our supporting person in that role. We used to have that role as a in-school suspension person, and we took the opportunity to move away from the focus on an in-school suspension model and focus on supporting students who were struggling to meet expectations. So that's the role that he plays, and it's been very valuable. We've also trained the staff on the model. We did it in August when we came back, because again, we had a lot of new staff that needed to learn the process, and then others who'd been away for so long, it was really important to refresh. And then recently at a staff meeting, we did another kind of a review on the teacher side of things, how teachers handle things in the classroom before they call for the support team. And then we are also doing some supports with sound discipline, and next Wednesday at Smart Wednesday, we have another session with sound discipline. So that's been really an important component. We have a peer mediation program that we developed in partnership with the Dispute Resolution Center of King County. They're tremendous partners that we've been working with for a number of years, and you know, the pandemic kind of interrupted our peer mediation model, but they kind of kept it going as much as they could virtually. But now that we're back in person, we've got a great crew of young individuals who are peer mediators, and we're utilizing them at the building level to mediate situations between students before they become bigger issues that would require, you know, that the administrative level of intervention. So and given the challenges that we're facing this year with kids coming back really kind of struggling to be together a little bit, that's been a really great tool to have. And then the last piece just that we wanted to highlight was some work that we're doing at our race and equity team and leadership team. We're really trying to focus on sharing our decision-making power across our committees. And so we've kind of teamed up to develop a walkthrough process this year that we're going to kind of pilot this year and try to put into full force with the team, with the whole school next year. But really it's focused around the student engagement. When you look at the Danielson framework, 3C is the kind of the heart of the framework, is engagement. And what we wanted to do was really look at it through kind of a race and equity lens and what that would be. And we talked about it as what would a student-centered classroom look like. So we're in the process of kind of refining a draft of that tool We got some good resources from some of the work we're doing with PSESD, and we're going to be looking at starting walks and when we come back from the break with a like a pilot volunteer group, and then expanding on that. And in our hopes is that we'll be able to collect data that'll guide our professional development and stuff as we move forward. All right, flip going, there you go, next one. So the areas of focus that we have this year really focused around the two first strategic plan goals from the district. The first was kind of a racial equity goal. And so the two pieces we focused on were involving stakeholders in the committees, especially ones that have decision-making power. And so the goal is really to make sure that we're getting parents, students, community partners to be part of those committees. And then the other is around homeroom, and really drilling down on how do we utilize homeroom as a tool. We do it every single day. And when kids come in 6th grade, that homeroom teacher is the one they're going to loop with the whole time they're at Showalter. So what we did was the first contact was really about connecting with the family and assessing what the student and the family needs were. And then we're trying to promote regular family communication each month, so we have ongoing connections throughout the year. And we're going to be using our CEE data to kind of measure how well we're doing that with folks. Then the second piece is around ELL progress. We're really recognizing the impacts of the pandemic on our long-term learners, and our LTELs are really our largest growing group. Although I think based on what I saw, we're going to be getting some more refugee students, but in the last couple of years, our LTEL population has really swelled. Also, we're looking at that implementation of the WIDA standards across the content areas, and really focusing in on that with a very specific or intention on vocabulary instruction in those classes. And then we're looking at some program modifications. Thanks to Ms. Chen and the finance team to help us fund an additional position, we're looking at adding an additional ELL staff member. It's posted now. Our goal is to transform our model in the fall from one where kids have standalone ELD classes to where the teachers are pushing in and coaching and modeling lessons, and those kids are not going to be missing additional classes for a standalone piece. With the shift to the WIDA standards and the focus on that language development in each of those content areas, then our goal is that they'll be getting specific language instruction, but within their content areas. So I think it'll give a lot of our ELL kids a chance to have elective choices that they didn't have before, and not miss core pieces of core content either. So we're excited about that, but that's one of the big areas of focus. And then the last is just around attendance, because we had a lot of kids who were disengaged or just disappeared during remote and even during hybrid learning. So it's really about re-engaging those students, and then looking specifically at students with disabilities and our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander students, because before we went out on the pandemic, their attendance rates were significantly lower than their peers. So we already had a concern about their attendance before the break, so we really want to follow up with them on that. And then as far as what we need, the big one is instructional coaches. Currently, I've got a 0.4 literacy coach, and I'm very appreciative of that, but I know we definitely could use more than 0.4, and we don't have any coaching in specific to math. Fortunately, there's been some categorical funding that TED has found for me that's going to sunset, but allowed us to get some additional coaching through our partners with Agile Mind, which is our math curriculum. So we're doing that, but moving forward, we could really use that support. And then just the last one, I said sustained funding. And I guess my biggest concern is just that I know that TED has communicated to me that our our categorical funding is going to be going down, and I know our enrollment's down a little bit, which impacts our BEA funding. So it's just really having support to be creative around being able to prioritize our needs and get those areas funded. So it's hard to ask for more when I know there's less coming, but I guess that's how it usually is. So any questions?
I'm always so impressed, Brett, with how your school works together as such a good team. So
Yeah,
that's a lot because of leadership. So thank you.
well, I'm blessed with a great staff. I really am. I've got a tremendous team, and things couldn't happen. I mean, I'm not the one in the classroom with the kids every day. They are. They do a tremendous job.
But you'll allow them to be who they are. So thanks.
Brett, I just want to say, wow. I really love that you're bringing to us the program and emphasis areas that you're doing, and not just the statistics. It just means, it speaks a whole lot more to me that you guys are actually making the changes needed. I just want to comment on a couple of things. I love that you're promoting reading. I just think you're right on there with and changing your library. That's amazing. It made me think of the episode of Friends last night, where the dinosaur section turned into the makeup section, makeout section. And of course, dinosaur guy was upset with that. But I can see the different sections in the library becoming hotspots just because they're favorites among the kids. I know my grandson would be in the sports section all day long, and to be able to just go to that section, I think is great. I think your student support stuff is amazing. I would love to, whether it's in a report or face-to-face, whatever, I would love to hear the stories, not specific stories naming kids, but some stories of those staff supports, and the mediation stories, and the ones that, are just showing us a different way rather than, in school suspension or whatever. But yeah, some stories behind that. So if there's a way for you to share stories, even if it's just sending me an email saying, hey, this kid got the help they needed today and their attendance record has changed, blah, blah, blah. The other thing, the student-centered engagement, I think that's the way we need to go. And the fact that you're focusing on that and getting your staff to focus on that is great. One of the questions I have is, you talked a lot about circles. Is that a curriculum or is that a method?
It's really kind of a method.
Okay.
At least the way it's been, we had worked with a group through our partnership with the Dispute Resolution Center, and they've connected us with some folks who came in and has done some training with the whole staff, but a lot of intentional training with my admin team as well. And so, like the last staff meeting or the last SMART that we had, where we did use circles, they had each of us in the leadership team kept circle in different rooms, but like I would not have been comfortable doing that in the past. But circles were new to me when we first started that, and so I've had a couple opportunities to keep circle. I'm still getting better, but I mean, but we did this we're learning the process with them, and the different levels of, we always want to jump to the solution first, which that's natural, but when you look at that process, it's more circular and it takes more time, but at the end of the day, I think we get better resolution. And like I said, we got great feedback from the teams when we did that, and we're trying, and I know I have teachers that use that regularly with their students.
Yeah, I just think that's great. And you're right. It takes a lot of courage to be able to do that, because you're actually going to get the feedback.
Right.
And it's not always what you want to hear, but if you don't hear it, you don't get to deal with it. So yeah, great job. And that's all my my comments. I look forward to continuing to see what unfolds at Showalter under your leadership.
Thanks, Jan.
I've got a question related to the long-term learners, ELL, MLL. So that's been an issue for a while, and generally defined as 5 or more years. And obviously, a lot of that, I mean, how they get to be 5 years has happened in the elementary schools by the time, before you get them. And so I'm just curious if you has any insights into, things that, to reduce that number, obviously, some of the issue has to be what goes on the elementary school. So do you have any kind of insights into what, based on what you're seeing, the students that come to you, how things maybe could be done better, or, ways to look at that problem would be helpful?
Yeah, that's a good question. You mean like so that less kids are coming to us already in that state, right? Like,
correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Honestly, I think like really focused, I'm trying to say this the right way. So I know that the elementaries have adopted the same readers writers model that we have at the middle school, but I think part of it is making sure that the implementation is there and across the board, and really promoting that reading portion. And I guess for us, I know we're going to be focusing on academic vocabulary, because like that's where kids really struggle, because most of the kids like you're talking about, Dave, like if you talk with them, you wouldn't necessarily know they were a language learner, because they have such great bics, I mean, they could have a conversation with you all day, but it's then when you hit the academic language that they really start to struggle. So I don't know if maybe there can be more of an early emphasis on that as part of their model. It's hard because they don't go from specialist to specialist necessarily like they do with us. And where if like in math class, we're going to talk about we're going to use that academic language, or in science, we're using that academic language. But, and that's not specifically written into the readers writers curriculum either for those other areas. So I'm hoping that the shift to the WIDA standards will help. I know hope's not a plan, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting, because I've always, for years I worked at Cascade View, and occasionally I would get into one of the ELD classes at Showalter, and I was kind of amazed at some of the students, because like you say, the students would sit and chat with you socially all day long,
right?
And you would hardly ever know it. But yeah, I think the emphasis on academic, that makes some sense to me. The other thing I just wanted to bring up, you didn't really talk about it in here, but the whole area of STEM, and particularly robotics. So I've been working with the students at Cascade View in robotics this year, and I can tell you that this year, because of some of the work that has been done by the teachers up there, we have some really capable robotics students and programming students and so forth. And it's just kind of a heads up that you'll be getting some students that are very capable in terms of their programming capabilities. And so I know I think you guys got a grant this year to kind of help develop maybe, your robotics program a little bit. But anyway, I just wanted to plug in. I'm sure, I don't know exactly what's going on at Thorndike, but I know, Tuckwell Elementary has had a good robotics program for a number of years. So anyway, just a heads up on the robotics program. Hopefully we'll be able to keep them challenged, because they'll be coming at you with some skills like you probably haven't seen before.
Okay.
The other thing I was interested in, your last comment on sustained funding. So in particular, I guess you mentioned, just the general question is sustained funding in what particular areas? So you talked about the coaching model,
right.
And I assume you also, you want the social emotional, the counselors and the student engagement. That are those the main areas you're talking about?
Yeah, because those are things that we've added to the mix that we're really finding to be helpful, and of course the coaching piece. So the things that we have in place that were new, we're trying to keep those things, obviously, but then I'm asking for more, and in a time I know when funds are going down. But I think sometimes it's looking at prioritizing some of our programs and then looking really critically. I mean, Ted's been great at working with me to kind of look at, like, are there things that we're spending money on that really we're not really getting a lot out of, and we have to start looking at some of the things we've added on as supplements, and if we're not getting a real good return, so to speak, on those supplemental pieces, maybe pulling them back and using that money in other places. And so he's been a great think partner around being able to kind of mentally get ready for have to make some choices, right? And so I really want to get in front of that and get with my staff and our community partners and stuff, and start looking at if we have to make some changes, then let's figure out what's the most important together.
Yeah, I think it's not, this whole area we've been pushing with the legislature for a while, and there will be coming next year for 22-23 school year, an extra half FTE in the general area of counseling, and you can use it for a variety of different things. So the bad news about that is the way the legislature did it. They put it in as a budget proviso, which means it's good for 1 year, and then it's not necessarily in law. So we have to work to get them to put it in law to make it sustained funding. And that's, I mean, I appreciate this is a thing we need to keep advocating with the legislature, is that you can't just throw a few dollars at us for 1 year and then that doesn't work. I mean, this needs to be sustained for a long number of time. So this is good information for me. I'm also, I'm going to start working on probably, the academics. I mean, the problem, of course, is that, things like BLAP and Title I are supposed to be for academic, but because of the fact that we need to, Maslow's hierarchy, we need to use it for the basic human needs, social and so forth. And if we can get those areas, the sports staff funded properly, then you could actually use Title I and LAP for the academics. And so anyway, I think that's a problem. So anyway, I appreciate that input. Thanks. That's all I got.
Thanks, Dave.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much. First off, I want to just commend you on the work that you're doing, particularly around the SEL, the emphasis on SEL. We all know how critical that is right now. And it's very clear that you had begun to lay the infrastructure even before the pandemic. I love Circle and just the profound impact that can have in so many different areas, especially as a restoration tool and a way to bring some restorative justice. So I love that you're really leaning into that and would love to hear more as y'all continue to do that work. I want to hear more at some point. Not necessarily today. I'm new, by the way, Carly Hoover. Very happy to be here. So I know there's a lot that I don't know. I can't wait to kind of get out to Showalter and really kind of see, get a lay of the land, see what's going on. Want to learn more and hear more about the building walkthrough process and just kind of what that plan is going to look like and just kind of how that's going to go. But I have 3 questions right now around committees specifically. I was curious what committees currently exist at Showalter. And then what has been the process for committee recruitment and how are you ensuring that all stakeholders are coming along and being invited into that work? And then lastly, along the same line, how are stakeholders notified when those meetings are taking place and invitations are extended to folks?
Okay. So the main kind of committee groups that we are operating, so we have a leadership team meeting, which is really kind of like used to be like department meeting or department chair meeting, when we really have just moved that into more of a leadership committee meeting. We have a SAIL team, which is our PBIS team. We have race and equity, and then we do a steering together piece. Those are the main meeting groups that we have. And then what we've done in the past as far as membership, the leadership team meeting originally was just the department chairs. Now then we've added we have ESP representation on there now as well. And we're recruiting, I think I've got some students coming, we finally have our ASB up and running. It was slow to get up and running. So we've got some of the ASB officers joining the leadership team this next time. We're looking at recruiting some parents on there. I have community partners on there. So like the dispute resolution folks are there, along with bridging cultural gaps, are part of our leadership team. And what I end up doing is sending out invites to the people that are there. I don't do like a general invite to like push out through Skyward or anything, but I just do a calendar invite for folks. As far as the other committees, we've different people. So Miss Perez is running the SAIL team, and then I've got other staff members that run the other committees, and they do a similar invite piece. Although I know the last steering together where we've got some posters going to get people get some more students involved. We usually have pretty good student involvement at steering together and race and equity. We get students, and then Director Ryder comes to some of our to steering together pretty frequently, and race and equity pretty frequently too. So we appreciate that.
Thanks so much. I wonder, as we continue to have conversations about increasing community voice, I wonder if there's ways that we can support from the district level and just get streamlining communication and just helping folks know that these committees even exist. I know it was only because Director Akbar Ryder invited me specifically to the Steering Together Committee. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to know that that was there. So whatever those outlets might look like, whether it's supporting with some flyers or Facebook, I know though those aren't the best modes necessarily, but if there's ways that we could support, I think that would be really, really useful. So.
Just thinking quickly, I know that Mr. Howard helped us just recently get connected with this outfit Soapbox, which is kind of a communications group, and maybe we can work with them to come up with a plan to do a better job of that.
No, it's a complex and nuanced issue. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Christopher, my question is related to the restorative practice circles and how they're a component of a lot of work that your community has been doing for over 3 years at least.
Yeah, at least.
Can you share a little more about how those restorative practice circles have improved leadership and community for your staff, for the students, and for you?
Sure. I think, well, if I'll start with like the admin circle level, because it's more of the learning for the leadership piece. And I think what we as a team have learned through that process is, one, to actually be vulnerable when we are and be ourselves, and like when we are working with staff, to be vulnerable and in circle to be open and really and then also, I think the thing that comes out of circle that we've learned more is it's more about listening than talking. And so then we're actually then really listening to the voices of the folks that we're working with, and then being able to take that as we move forward and we work with the staff, so that they can use that same process as it goes down to the student level. I know in what we've used this process in the area of like where we have discipline issues, and we've been using it to resolve some, like to restore situations where students where there's been harm. And I know that even in my case, I've had, not this year, but in the previous year, I had an issue with a student where I was able to have that restorative conversation facilitated with that student. And then I know that we utilize that with the student support team really frequently. And I think at the end of the day, what it does around that area is it's really helped us to reduce the amount of exclusionary consequences that students are experiencing, like suspensions and even just time out of class. So I think that's probably where I've seen the most traction is, I mean, our goal is to keep kids in the classroom. And so the way we were doing intervention around challenging behavior in the past was always yielding results of kids either being down in the office for a lot of time or in school or suspended, and we've moved away, and that's helped us move away from that model.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, anything else? All right, thank you, Mr. Christopher.
All right, you guys have a great day. Thank you so much. Come by and visit Showalter anytime. We'd love to see you.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to
Thanks.
discussion item B, school improvement plan summary. And Dr. Herndon, take it away.
All right, I thought we had that one. Let me look real quick. We have what we had is, I asked Mr. Howard, he and I were chatting about a good way to kind of summarize what each of these school improvement plans look like. So we have a spreadsheet that just kind of has each plan and then summarizes what they have in there. It's not as detailed, obviously, as each of the pieces. So I'm trying to find that particular item, but the idea was so that you could see each of the plans side by side, especially for the elementaries, since there's 3 of them and they're all a little bit different. I think the other piece is that what we're really wanting to do is to look for those commonalities and see within the school improvement plans if there are areas from our strategic plan that we feel are not really quite being addressed yet at the building level. We want to make sure that we can place an emphasis on some of those areas if those are the priorities that as a district we're choosing to do. So this is basically trying to set up a tool for us to be able to help with tracking the impact of whatever the emphasis is on what we have. So somewhat like Mr. Christopher was talking about, you know, if we're investing professional development and resources into trying to address some of the issues, and we've chosen a certain path or a certain community provider to help us with that, but the results aren't really the same. We want to be able to go through and figure out why or what it is, or if we need to redirect those resources or have some additional time. So this was just an attempt to kind of recap that. And I think also in looking at that, as we look at our next agenda discussion item, which is the proposals for the strategic work, the idea was to say, okay, well, as we're thinking about this is what the buildings have been focusing on based on the data that they see with their students. Is that shaping anything that as a total district we need to be emphasizing as well? Is there commonality in that? I'm not seeing the particular item, so I will send it to you for sure as soon as I have it. And I know Mr. Howard and I were working on it this week, so I'm just not recalling. I think the item, I'm getting it confused with the briefing paper on the strategic plan comparisons, which is a little bit different than the school improvement plan pieces. And that's part of the next work, next piece. But after we have moved to selecting what that is, I think it'll be informative with whatever organization we're using for the strategic plan work to see what the buildings are working on. I think that will help. As they're also in the listening sessions with community and students and staff. Those are all the pieces that we've talked about. So we just want to make sure, one, that for the school improvement plans, you see what the each of the schools are working on for this year. As we talked about previously, the school improvement plans for 22-23, the next school year, they're going to start working on that in the spring. So after we have any of the new strategic directions, excuse me, after we have any new priorities or change priorities in the strategic plan, I just want to make sure that the school improvement plans are reflecting whatever those priorities we've decided to do. And when I say we, I mean, it's not just me or the board. That's what this whole strategic plan investment of getting feedback from various stakeholders should be helping to shape what the community, what we as educators feel, what you as policy, elected officials and policymakers are looking at too. We're trying to get all that in alignment so that we're pulling in the same direction.
Hey, Flip, I'm wondering, using the circle model, do your admins, your principals, vice principals, do they, I know they have the opportunity through a board meeting, but do they see each other's SIP plans? And do they get a chance to, I know they try to learn from each other, but it seems like the variation of the SIP plans would be a great conversation starting place for their conversation, a circle conversation. Does that kind of thing happen, or how do you see that? Or do you not see that as a possibility?
No, I think it's a good possibility for a variety of reasons. One is that, again, I think it's important for the elementaries to have conversation with each other, which they do as a principal group to talk about similarities, but they also have the uniquenesses of their individual building or community that they feel, might be an area that they need to focus on. So conversation with principals in general is good. Also having them all together and seeing what the focus is. As Mr. Christopher was talking about, his emphasis is on, he's making sure he's emphasizing the reading portion again. If they're seeing trends at the secondary level, Director Larson has talked about this as well, mentioning the robotics piece. If we're doing work at one level that we want to sustain and continue to see evolve and develop throughout the other levels, we want to make sure that that through line is happening all the way. Additionally, if we're seeing signs of students' outcomes or achievements being challenged, let's say in math or science or reading, whatever it may be, at the high school level or the middle school level, then we want to backward map that to make sure that we've got the right supports in the entire way. Are there indicators that we have, and there are certain indicators about if students in their attendance or their math level or their reading levels at certain grades are indicators that they may need some additional supports. That's some of the longer cohort model data that I think is really important for us to track. But additionally, I think I've mentioned this before, we get students at all different levels. So they might not have the benefit of the supports we might have at other previous grade levels when they come to us. We still need to have a good diagnosis about what that means and then figure out what supports we can put in place to help them get the most out of their achievement and anything else they may need assistance with. So, and to me, it's not just about what their test score is at that particular level. That's telling us some information. But every year, students should continue to grow in what they have. So that's the whole point. If we're seeing data that says a student is 2 or 3 grade levels behind in their reading at 5th grade, in 6th grade, I'm not expecting Showalter to make up 2 or 3 years growth in 1 year. That's going to be very difficult, but that particular student with some identified resources should be able to be more than just 1 year ahead at the end. So it might be 1.5 years, they've gained a half a year, or whatever it may be. And through those interventions, those are the pieces that I want to make sure the principals are tracking to say, yep, we've invested time and resources in this particular support model with this community-based organization, and we're seeing great gains. Or, we're trying to approach it in this model, but we're just not seeing the gains. Like we need to figure something else out. But that only happens through the communication between and among the administrators to compare what they're working on and the data that they're seeing. So we try and do that as much as possible, reviewing that data. And, you know, Mr. Howard's really good about reviewing data too. He's very data driven and looking at information and what he feels is going to be a good investment in time and resources. And that may be the case, but it still has to be the conversation amongst and between the schools to figure out what they can do to help support each other.
I just want to piggyback off of what Dr. Herndon is sharing. This year, he has allowed us to, as principals, work with AWSP to kind of develop a culture. And that's the Association of Washington State Principals Association. They're coming in with the infinity loop, and they are actually showing our principals how to work together. Principals in Tukwila have really worked independently. They haven't worked together or developed a culture to work together to share resources or to actually understand that we're a team. We've been kind of, if someone was the Seahawks or someone was the Pelicans or someone was, they were in competition with one another. So they never really had developed a culture of let's all come together and we're one district. And so as Dr. Herndon has moved us in the first step, which is having all the elementary schedules be the same, that was a big aha moment for everybody. That was like a shift behaviorally, and they were like, oh my gosh, you know. And so now the next step is to start to talk about what does that look like culturally, what does it look like in our buildings, what does that look like with our teachers, what does that look like social emotionally. So we're moving in that direction, and partnering with AWSP has really helped that conversation move forward. And then I want to backtrack a little bit. Dr. Herndon has put on the schedule for the school improvement plans. We will be doing a work session on the dashboard. The dashboard's coming up where you get a chance to see how we're doing on our district goals as well as our building goals. It's going to be a little bit difficult because all the building goals aren't aligned totally, and so but you'll get a chance to see that. And then I would welcome to have the principals come back and present their findings at the end of the school year, so you get a chance to see how they did on their goals that they've set in place, how they developed conversations with their staff, how they got feedback from the staff, and how they incorporated their feedback into their new improvement plans, which Dr. Herndon has set a date of March for all that to be in place. So by March, they should have surveyed their staff. Everybody should be on the same page, knowing the direction we're going in. They should have clear academic goals about where we're headed and why we're headed and where we're going. The communication should be clear, and the budget should be built around that. So in March, you should see a clear piece of evidence with that in place, and then that'll be on our dashboard, and that'll be a front-facing document that will go out to our public and our community. And so the two big pieces that we're really looking to make changes on is involving the community. We know that those are clear attributes to making change happen. The community has to be involved. And so we're trying to move in that direction. Two things that we haven't done, just like the pandemic, is helping our community be a part of those conversations. So that reach out in conversations, we're working with principals to develop those skill levels to make sure they're a part of that. And it's not just, you know, we know parents are contributing right now. They get their kids to school. But what does it look like as they contribute into the actual environment and help shape that in the schoolhouse? So those are other pieces that we're working with. And Dr. Herndon has also allowed us to use Soapbox to help in between finding a communication person that Future Sound ESD is working with us to develop those look forwards as well. So these pieces are really key, but it all came from the vision of Dr. Herndon saying this is the direction we want to go in so we can start to move forward. And I think you're hearing that at the secondary level a lot stronger than you do at the elementary level right now. And we have work to do at the elementary level, but we will get there. And thanks to you guys' leadership as our board, continuing to ask those inquiry questions, we're going to be able to get to the pieces that we need to put in place to make sure all our students can be successful.
Yeah, I think it's one of the points you just made is really key, the getting everybody, principals, to work together, because I think that's the only way we've had some ongoing problems like the long-term ELL issue I was talking about, which is system-wide. It's not just, one building. I mean, it's a system-wide issue. I think robotics can be under that category. Some of the math things can be under that category. So I think, yeah, that sounds like a really good, bringing in AWSP to help with that sounds like a really good thing. I also want to just comment a few things on just the school improvement plans and the district improvement plan in general. And Mr. Howard has, I don't know, covered some of these things going forward, but, there seemed to be, kind of as I was looking over the school improvement plans, kind of a lack of consistency, particularly in how data was presented. And that makes it kind of hard to understand. I mean, I understand each building may have some different goals, but the structure of it should be similar because it makes it much easier to understand what's going on. Another one that I bring up kind of constantly, and again, if it sounds like March may see some progress on this, but kind of lack of reflection on the previous year's goals. I mean, I don't think we can be a learning organization or a continuous improvement or whatever word you want to use, unless we can, set some goals and then reflect on why we did or didn't achieve the goals. And it gets back to, the whole thing, we've done a lot of things over the years, and, what has worked, what hasn't worked. If we aren't looking at data and kind of figuring out what's actually producing results and what's not, then, we're just going to keep kind of flailing around. So the direction of kind of focusing on, some kind of dashboard with some specific goals, and then seeing if we achieved them, and then really going down deep into why they were or were not achieved. The other, on a lot of the elementary presentations, there was a lot of goals kind of put forward, 8% more, 5% more, whatever, but there was frequently there was no baseline for, okay, where are we now? I mean, you can't measure, say we're going to improve reading by 5% if we don't, okay, which measure are you using and what's the baseline we're starting from? Wherever that is fine, but we need to have, so we can tell whether we actually, made whatever goal it was. The other issue was, I was kind of, and it sounds like it's a work in progress as well, is to align the school improvement plans with the district improvement plan. I'm seeing two different things going on here, and I understand it's a work in progress, but I think that's something that we need to get aligned and focused. I mean, the district improvement plan I see is kind of focusing on some areas. That's one of the problems we've had with goals in the past, is they're just all over the place. I mean, they're, every group, every grade, and you can't really, focus on that. So the district improvement plan started to focus on third grade reading, eighth grade math, fifth grade math, those kinds of things. And so, that seems like the direction we need to get down into the school improvement plans. The other thing, and I heard it was good to hear from Mr. Christopher today about, there's this whole issue of, when I look at some of the elementaries, there's a lot of emphasis that we've shifted to in recent years, which is probably not good, to interventions, pull out models for special ed students, for ELL students, and Mr. Christopher was talking about now, no, let's push for the ELL, let's push it back to a more inclusive model and also for special education students. So I think that's a key thing that we need to and I understand that's kind of where the direction is, but I think that needs to filter down more, particularly probably to the elementary schools. And the last thing I just wanted to bring up was the whole measure of, how are we measuring academic progress? And it's still when I look at the district improvement plan, I see it in terms of proficiency rather than in terms of student growth when we're measuring, the results from the SBAC or iReady or whatever the measure is. But I think it's really important for us to be measuring, growth, student level growth data, as opposed to just proficiency data. That is what, part of the reason for that is to align with, in our collective bargaining agreements we have with the associations, they talk about, teachers, for example, in the evaluation using student level growth data. So how much students are growing. And this, it's an alignment issue. So I still see in the district improvement plan a lot of proficiency measures, but not student growth measures. And I think we really should be moving to a student growth model. I was just in a session with the Washington Education Research Association. They were talking about they were talking about training from the AWSP about data literacy and using student growth as the measure for a lot of goals in how we do the system rather than straight proficiency. Ultimately, you want students to be proficient, but I think what I've seen over the years is if you achieve your student growth models, you will get proficiency will happen. But student growth is where I think a lot of times you need to focus on. So anyway, those are just my thoughts on the whole dip and sit process. Sounds like we're moving in the right direction, but we got a ways to go to get there. Thanks.
Any other questions, feedback?
I'll just say those are a lot of good comments, and I agree with a lot of that. Again, I believe you need both of those. You're measuring both the proficiency and the growth. The proficiency is good to know because you want to know where students stand in relation to those expectations. But the advantage of having the growth data is obviously if you have students that are already proficient at a particular grade level, you want to make sure they're still advancing. And that can be a challenge, or there are some students who are already more than proficient, and you want to make sure you're continuing to nurture the learning of all the students in the classroom. I also agree on the push-in model. I know conversations both with Ms. Chen and Ms. Jones for special ed and for ELL both believe in that model of supporting students in the classroom. They're really, their emphasis is definitely on supporting that in-class model, not the pull-out model. And that can be challenging sometimes for some staff. You can have such a range of learners, and so we want to make sure that we're supporting our classroom staff as much as possible to have them as successful as possible. I think there's a good amount of that also that modeling helps at the pre-K level. We've talked about a lot of that pre-K. So some of our pre-Ks and having full range of learners in the pre-K model is really good too. And we're trying to make sure that we can support that as well. But it's all very exciting stuff. I think the alignment just helps with the clarity. There's a lot in that data information. Some people get super excited about data, and other people kind of their eyes glaze over when they start talking too much about the data. But the best thing about the data is data is just like anything else. It's a great tool. It's a great piece of information. And there's almost always something that someone can get excited about. There's some like string of data that someone can say, oh, but this is what I really am interested in. And that mix. I know Director Bolajak has talked a lot about the qualitative data. And I think you need both of those. I was just reading an article about King County and how they were not going to do a count of homelessness in the county. I'm guessing because it's COVID related, but they just wanted to interview certain folks. And there was a researcher there who commented, I think this was an opinion piece in the Times, about how you need both. You need quantitative data and qualitative data. And I believe that too. I think we need both of those things. They're both really important in the work that we do. So I think, good conversations are happening. I think we've got a really strong supportive team. Mr. Howard's done a good job. Mr. Draganoff in HR is doing a great job. Ms. Birdsong's really helping out with the resources. I think our level of communication, we're just trying to increase that quite a bit to make sure we can facilitate good support and communication amongst the buildings. So I'm excited about that work and how it really supports and interweaves with the district strategic plan. I think that's also really important. and obviously a good segue to our next section. So I'll let Director Poe Ryder.
Yeah. Well, I just want to acknowledge and support the leadership of you, Dr. Herndon, and you, Mr. Howard, in terms of really recognizing the importance of folks being on the same page and being really intentional in how we do our work. And I think that with this year, we have our strategic planning, or strategic vision, or strategic work framework, whatever it is that we end up doing, that's what we're going to be doing. But we also have our building improvement plans, right? Our school improvement plans. And we have, like, I'm thinking about work of the board, our
Mhm.
budget. How in the world can we have a conversation around budget if we're not hearing from our schools and from our different leaders throughout the community? And so I really think that along with really holding our schools accountable, we ought to be also held accountable to align with and make sure that we're also on the same page as well. And so that's just my thought, that that's something that I would hope that we're also continuing to be intentional in our work. So just thank you, Mr. Herndon and Mr. Howard. All right. We'll go ahead and move on. Proposal for strategic plan work. Mr. Howard, would you like to go ahead and start this one?
Yes, under the direction of Dr. Herndon, he has assigned us to take a look at our strategic plan. And I think it's a great vision to start taking a look at what we're doing. We're talking about really a culture shift. We learned anything from COVID. We've seen the resistors, and we've seen people get a shot, and we see people still questioning. And that is really a prime example of how you do a culture shift. When you go in to say, we're going to shift how we're going to do a pull-out model or a push-in model, what we get is people saying, no, I love it. And then we look at the data and they're like, I still love it. And we're like, well, yeah, but we got to make gains. Yeah, but I still love it. We have that going on. And so when we start to make a shift under strategic plan, when they say it really takes 5 years to do a culture, it's really 5 years to get to a point where we have a tipping point. We're not going to get everybody on board. We're not going to get everybody really moving in a direction where everybody is doing the same supports in place, but we can get to a tipping point. And the tipping point usually is anywhere between 70 and 80% of our staff to start to not only believe, but go into what we call second order change. And they start to take ownership and understand that this is a shift and this is best for our kids. And so we're on that tipping point right now of presenting information, having dialogue, doing collaboration with everybody. And that includes our leadership, who has to embrace that. We always use a lot of terms of growth mindset, lifelong learners. And after we say all those things, now what does that behavior look like? And so we're at that pace where we are talking about that behavior that needs to shift. And so the 3 plans that you have in front of you, hopefully you have the strategic plan comparison sheet. You get a chance to see what we were looking for, definitely around race, training on race and equity, cost, which is always, when we look at costs, I was always taught to look at it like your own personal checkbook. And if you are looking at this from a cost standpoint, make sure you get what you're looking for and make sure you do it efficiently. And then we're looking at the other components about the community equity focus, how we meet the needs of the district, and then key components and results meeting district goals. So those are the big buckets. And as you can see, those were the 3 different proposals that came our way. The other piece that was really important that you will see down in the narrative of the briefing was what out of all 3 proposals, how many of the companies have actually worked with a diverse population? What were the results? How long have they been doing that? And really working in Washington State. And so you have 3 different proposals, 3 different approaches, because we wanted to be vast and wide, looking at from a business model to companies that were steeped in data, companies that were steeped in working with our diverse populations and their success rates. And so as we scroll down, you get a chance to look at the background of of the companies, and then you look at the values that we're looking at. This is where we're headed. Engaging instructionally, building productive school climate, facilitating productive collaboration and professional learning communities as they're aligned, and then managing our resources. And so those are the 4 big buckets that we're valuing. And you will see that not only in words, but you'll start to see that in our culture as we start to build that. Down below, you get a chance to see the backgrounds of each company, CEE, FC Hurdle Consulting, and Red Frog Coaching. You get a chance to see that each company has done tremendous work working with students of color. And I will say, you know, when I started digging into each one of the companies, I got a chance to see that each company has done exceptional work. Red Frog has been working with the Alaskan group of BIPOC people and trying to make a difference there. CE has been working consistently since 1999 to make a difference, and they've tested all their methodologies and areas that have been overlooked and have not been successful. And they've constantly retooled and retooled and retooled. FC Hurdle Consulting is a group that just started out. They're really based out of Portland, and Puget Sound ESD is working with them, and they were recommended to us as well as a continuous improvement. But they were working with 2 of our principals this year as well. So they have some background working with our population also. So you get a chance to see that as well. What really was really great for me to look through in this comparison was the equity and race focus that our board has been very clear that they wanted us to go in. You get a chance to see the background and what they've been doing there and their accomplishments. And then below, you get a chance to see the pilots that they've done over the years, how many years they've been doing this work, and the effectiveness of the work that they've been doing it. And the pieces that I really liked, you will see a recommendation at the very end, but some of the things I thought were really, really important that we needed to have in place, which was the 360 leadership with our principals. If we're going to align to a system, we needed to have that component that needs to be in place, and the ability to survey our community and adapt our surveys to what you as a board and superintendent wants to see. That's really, really important. And then the other piece was the cost. You got a chance to see the cost over 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. There's a model from Red Frog that gives a range. I kind of look at that as a menu of going to kind of a walkthrough if I was going to eat at a smorgasbord. And next thing I know, I picked everything. I want noodles, I want steak, I want this, and at the very end, I end up paying maybe more than I originally thought I was going to pay when I walked in the door. So you're seeing a range. And I think when I talked to, I know when I talked to Red Frog, they thought that this was a better option for us. And that way we could actually choose and what we wanted and what we didn't want. But again, that range gets pretty high. As you go down, you can see the key outcomes and results of our district goals. And you get a chance to see that's labeled out pretty clearly from CEE, FC Hurdle, and Red Frog. And then our community equity focus as well. That's laid out also. And at the very end, you see the recommendation that I talked to Dr. Herndon about, and then made a recommendation to the board that we go with CEE. And based off of the briefing paper, the evidence that was presented to you, to me, it was very clear that they can meet our needs. They have the capacity to move. They're willing to collaborate with us. They're willing to make adjustments to where we need to be. And at the same time, they are able to give us feedback about what currently we have in place as far as tools to measure our success and maybe where we need to go. If we want to go to value-added data as a growth measure, or looking at aligning our formative assessments, because right now we do formative assessments, but they're not aligned. And so as we start to do that work and assessing and seeing where we're at, CEE has the ability to, and the knowledge and PD to be able to help our principals, our teachers, and our superintendent and board to give them feedback and make adjustments, because they're willing to give community feedback. They're able to give the superintendent feedback, and they're able to give the board feedback about how they're doing as well. And so I thought those pieces were very key about accountability, as well as helping us grow and be reflective about the goals and other things that we've set and the direction we want to go in. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Howard.
And just kind of as a reminder, so we do have the opportunity to pay for some of this through a current grant that we have. But my guess would be that would probably only cover the remainder of this year. In the supporting years, we'd have to have a different source, or we could apply for another grant for the ongoing piece. But this initial payment for probably this first phase of whatever it is we need to do for this, the remainder of this 21-22 school year to really adjust, that could be covered by the grant. But in the subsequent years, what we have is not going to be able to carry over. Money's not going to carry over for that. So just something to consider when we're looking at the multiple phases.
Actually, I guess that was kind of my first question is, so how much grant money do we have available for this, and when does it, I think you said it has to be allocated by the end of the calendar year? Yeah,
it has to be encumbered by the end of this month, which would, again, it would cover any of the work probably going through June. And when I look at these proposals, there's work basically to get feedback on the strategic plan for this year, right? And then it looks like each of the proposals has follow-ups in the following years, probably for the basis of feedback. Are we continuing to be aligned? What additional feedback do we have? When I look at those proposals, that's what I'm considering. What are those costs associated with that in the subsequent years? And then again, we could either look at general fund dollars, we could apply for an additional grant to see if there's something to continue the work that we've been doing. But the money that we would have to have encumbered by the end of this month, I think would only be good through June, and not carry over to the following years. And that amount is enough to cover any of these proposals for their first year proposals, for sure.
I'm hearing, Mr. Howard, that you, given all the extra sort of analysis work, the recommendation was CEE.
Yes, the recommendation was CEE. CEE is aligned with where we want to go and what we are planning to do, and planning on the direction Dr. Herndon wants us to go in the next 3 to 5 years. And to me, they have the capability of supporting us and growing us and aligning with AWSP and our current structures we have in place right now with the data that we're collecting. And so when we take a look at the data that we've been collecting, if we want to go in a different direction, I believe they have the capacity and the ability to pivot quickly to help support us.
Well, I was looking at the CE, part of I was struggling a little bit what exactly we're asking these different folks to do, because they each seem to be wanting to do something somewhat differently. So the CE proposal says development of an updated strategic plan. So what is the updated strategic? I mean, what we talked about was we have a strategic direction. And if I go back and look at that, there's a bunch of, what we never really got to that was any kind of specific goals and measurable goals and so forth. So is that what they mean? Is your understanding that's what they mean when they say updated strategic plan, or do they mean something different?
Yes, that's what they're saying. As we're reading the powerful, the powerless, we're missing staff and community feedback. And so those pieces, as we start to build relational trust and the academic press, those pieces that we're looking to get feedback on, those are the pieces that need to really hone in on how we develop the goals that we're looking for and buy-in from everyone. So right now, Tuckwell Elementary is the first school that's going through the surveys and collecting the data. We have one set of data. They've done the second part. Showalter is going to be doing it next, and so is Foster. And so as we start to move through that process, by March, we'll have a clear, delineated kind of, I would say, step A, step B, step C. You will see it delineated all the way through where we're headed, and the communication will be clear with our staff and our community of the direction we're going in. So no one has to ask, why are we spending money here? Everybody who's a part of that conversation in that loop, so they know where we're spending money and why we're spending money, because they help develop it. So that's the piece that the pivoting of what they're saying, the alignment piece. So right now, yes, the goals are kind of broad, but they're going to get really clear by March.
I guess the other question that I was, so CE, I mean, they have the broad set of surveys and so forth, but is part of this process going to be something more than just, multiple choice surveys? So are they going to be, I was in a session with Quincy was talking about empathy interviews. I mean, the concept that, how are we going to get this information from the community? Is it strictly through, multiple choice surveys, or is it richer than that? I mean, we're going to have, sit down conversations one-on-one with different members of different communities, making sure that we've got representatives from all the communities. Is that included in this work?
Yeah, in the proposal, they talked about doing one-on-one, small group. All three proposals were basically saying they could do all that piece. They can do the quantitative and qualitative. And I think we want both. We want small group, we want large group, and we want to develop a continuous piece on how we're going to do that and train our principals why we're doing that and how we continue to do that. And not just, we came together once and then parents go away and then we come back again 3 or 5 years later. No, we need to have this as a continuous loop all the time, part of our conversations. And part of that is making sure either we have PTSAs at each building or we have a PTSA or a PTO for our district. So we have continuous feedback from our parent group and have them be a part of our community. That's kind of the direction we're going in as well. So as we start to develop these action groups, we want to make sure they continue and they're a part of building what our future is based off of where we want to go. So that's the next step.
Okay.
I'm interested in terms of contingency. So in terms of if it's, gift cards or like, how will we honor our community's time, talent, and labor for sharing? Because, as part of building trust and healing broken relationships with a relationship, you just don't go and take again, right? Go in and take. So by offering up cultural wealth, what are those things that, what's in it for our families, for our staff? So I think, Mr. Howard, I hear you saying about sort of the importance of the loop. This is how, this is what you've done. Here's where we're moving. I just would also want to just make sure that their input is being honored. And so I don't know, I didn't see anything in the proposal about contingency or, payment, or, if community members come together, students come together and share their feedback, will they be paid?
This is a place that I think we all struggle. How do we utilize state funds and pay our parent constituents when they are actually doing that? It's a labor of love for sure, because your kids are there and you're vested. I think this is where our outside agencies, our 501c3s, could come into place to actually allow us to have the flexibility of monies to do things of that nature. But we know we're bound by certain restrictions on how we can spend state money and grant money. But I think there's some some flexibility with some of our agencies that we work with to maybe do what you're, I think, leaning towards, or maybe a gift card or some way to say thank you for doing what you're doing. If it's not feeding them or when they come to a meeting, or just honoring them and saying thank you by giving them certificates, but also maybe something that we do at the end of the year that I saw work really well at the end of the year. Our board members did the raffle and honored certain people at the end of the year, things of that nature. I mean, we have to start to build a culture around that to do what you are moving us in that direction to do, to honor our community. So we have to build some capacity there, and that's easy to do. We just have to start to move in that direction to develop something like that. And I'll lean on Dr. Herndon as well to give me some direction on how he wants me to proceed with that, and see how we can get funds maybe from corporate people, whether it's our banking, Boeing, and other places that are in our vicinity, Foster's Golf Course, or other places that are there that maybe could contribute to supporting our families and saying, hey, thank you for doing this. So.
Yeah, I think we can talk with the folks in the original grant, since that's not state dollars, to see if we can set aside dollars to help with that. Because I think that any of the groups doing that, they can do that through the interviews, or one-on-one interviews, whatever they may have, and then facilitate that, because I don't think they were calculating that as part of the cost. However, if we know what their costs are, we can ask that from the funder to begin with, who's willing to pay for this, and just set aside those dollars and basically put those there, or buy a bunch of gift cards. I will say, in the for the SRO conversations that are coming up, the group that's doing that work, helping with the facilitation, they have communicated about, they have gift cards for people doing the one-on-one interviews, not necessarily the bigger ones, but they'll have follow-up interviews, because they can track that down. They have to have basically a paper trail of where their funds go to. So they'll have people who sign off, and they get their name and address, whatever it may be. And then their gift card's already ready to go for that. So they already have that built in for that work that they're going to be doing. So I think for this, it would just be a conversation with the funder to say, we'd also, this wasn't in a proposal, but we'd also like to set aside dollars, or we're going to purchase a bunch of gift cards for participants in the work that's happening as well.
Yeah, and even just with research methods, in terms of participation levels, are
Mhm.
you're more likely, right?
Oh, yeah.
And not only that though, but it really is, it's
Yeah.
honoring people's time, right?
Yeah.
And it's a good practice. I mean, I'm thinking about several school clubs that the students participate, and they get gift cards, or so there's ways to do that. So it would be aligning with our community-based organizations to do that kind of work as well. So please, that would be my insertion. I would want to make sure that there's, maybe it's a raffle for the paper survey, but then for the interviews, people who participate in those in-depth interviews also.
Yeah, I'll talk to the funder for sure, because it would be a cost not in these proposals, but I think either way, any of these year one proposals are under our initial budgeting, what we thought these might cost. So I think the funder will be okay with it. We have a scheduled meeting, myself and Mr. Howard, with the group that's facilitating this particular grant. So that's coming up in the next week or two, and we'll insert that. I don't think that will be a problem, again, because they're not state funded dollars. It's separate dollars that are coming our way.
Anything else?
I have one kind of philosophical comment. I look at this kind of on a simple level. That's the way my mind works. About whether we are going out to get the community on board with what we already plan to do, or whether we're going out to let the community determine where we're going. And when I read this and I hear what's being said, it feels like we have something in place and we want the community to know it. And maybe that's a possibility, but I would rather have us be cutting edge and leave it open and not have an end, not have a, this is where we want to go with our district idea, but not know where we're going to go. And I guess my caution is with CEE, they are so well developed and they are already working with a plan for our district. How does that open it up to allow for a plan to evolve? And I just, maybe we're not talking about a plan to evolve. Maybe we're talking about a plan to get everybody on board with. I don't know. Do you see the difference in my thinking? And of course you do, because it's very simple thinking. But I guess that's where my caution, my mind goes, is to how do we continue to keep it open-ended and let the influence of the community change where we're going?
I think your thinking is great. One of my coaches used to say all the time, KISS, keep it simple, smarty. And so when he used to say that to me, I used to say, sure, but as we started to work together, I started to understand the behavior around that. And so what CEE is doing is basically saying, this is what you have in place right now. This is what you can measure. Now, where do you want to go? So they're not directing us. They're just giving us a real mirror look at where we're at and then allowing us to say where we want to go. And that's what I love about the flexibility about it. The other piece about it is they want to make sure we look at all the data that we have and involve with the powerless to powerful, the direction we're going in is to involve all our stakeholders in that conversation. So once we get that data back, as we continue to read this book here, you'll see where we're headed. That academic press and that conceptual framework, we're just at the early stages of collecting that. And so that will give us even more data to say, okay, this is what our teachers have said. This is what our paraeducators have said. This is what our custodial staff has said. This is where our relational trust is. Now, where do we want to go? And so that dashboard of information is so important. So when we come back to you, we can say, this is the results that we were able to gather. This is what we're measuring. And these are directions that we recommend. And then from there, a decision has to be made as a board and superintendent to say, is this the direction we want to go in, or do we want to go in a different direction, or can we afford that direction that they're asking for us to go in? So this is what's coming back to you. It's going to be a menu of options for you to make a decision about what you can support and what is being asked for.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. What I'm hearing is we have a strategic direction, which we have already published. Part of that is getting feedback on that strategic direction that's been in place for a while. But then we also need the actual strategic plan. That's where we're getting a lot of feedback as well. So what are the items we're actually putting into place that will continue to guide our focus direction where we want to be? So it's what we currently have, just what Mr. Howard said, what we currently have in addition to feedback. That's also what I like about the multi-year approach about these. So we can put that in place, but for all of these, you're seeing 2-3 years where they'll continue to go out and get the feedback on, okay, so this is what we are focusing on now. Is that still the direction? So for the next couple of years, we'll continue to get that feedback on if we're on the right track or not, and hear feedback from our community, our students, our staff, our parents.
I guess, yeah, along those lines, I'm curious how, so there's this big trend going on in the state, mastery-based learning, and a lot of districts are doing, graduates of profiles, and it's like, okay, what do we as a community, and that includes students and community, want our graduates to come out with, what set of skills, and it's more than just the academic skills that have been traditionally part of courses and so forth, but also the social emotional skills, those kinds of things. And a lot of districts are going through the the exercise now of getting together the community and defining, okay, what is it that we want our students to come to graduate with? And I'm wondering, do you see that concept included in this work or not?
Yes, for sure.
Mhm.
Okay.
The quick and dirty answer is yes. Dr. Herndon wouldn't have allowed me to do what I'm doing if it wasn't inclusive and continuing to look futuristic about things that we want to do. He's always asking that question of how does this align? He's also asking me the question, what are we known for in Tukwila? We got to be known more than just diversity. What stamp are we putting out there, and where's the evidence of that? So when he has those conversations with me, that is kind of the direction he wants us to go in and where we're building. But at the same time, we got to build a culture around it. This is new. The work that, if you go on page 20 of the Powerless to Powerful book, you will see the format of the learning piece, and it has the academic, the social supports, and the relational trust. Those are the three big pieces that we're looking at. And right now, CEE measures SEL work from teachers and from staff. That academic press, which is embedded in the standards, the goals, and the formative assessments is there, and then the relational trust, which we have to have from staff in order to move it forward. So yes, for sure, those pieces are so key, and we have to continue to, when you build a relationship, we have to continue to keep coming back and making sure we grow that relationship. We can't just do it once. We have to continue to be in relationship, like we're meeting now on a regular basis. We have to build that in with our teachers, our staff, to do that on a regular basis so we can continue to grow. Because if not, I won't know what you like if you say, hey, look, I love carrots, and then all of a sudden January comes and you're like, I don't like carrots anymore, but I haven't talked to you since September. I won't know. And so we have to build in time to have that on a regular basis. And that's what I hear you saying. And that's going to be a challenge with budgetary constraints and a school system that was never meant to do that. But I think with underneath Dr. Herndon's leadership, we're going to get to that place where we have a piece of that, not just surveys, but a piece of how we're going to build that into our culture as we develop that moving forward.
Yeah, and as far as the budgetary aspect of it, I think the legislature is taking on this issue, and if so, what we'll need to do is provide some good feedback as to them as to, okay, you guys want to do this, then this is what it's going to cost, because we've sat down and we've talked with our community and so forth, and this is what they say, and here's the realistic cost of it. So hopefully we can then get the legislature to buy into all that and as well. So that's part of the work too.
I'm struggling a little bit with monetary or gift cards for people to be involved. I would hope that the community would want to be involved because it's for our students. So I'm struggling with that concept.
Yeah, I can understand that. As director of Poet Writer said, it's not uncommon though for, there's different levels that you have. There are a lot of people who, they'll do a survey or something like that because it doesn't take very long. It's like 5 or 10 minutes or something like that. But usually the more in-depth or one-on-one interviews, I participate in some of those, but I usually decline any of the gift cards or anything like that, just because I just want to participate and get the information back. But usually if I'm participating in a group, like a follow-up group for somebody that wants, an hour of my time, it's not uncommon to have a gift card or something like that, $20, $10, whatever it may be, even $5. Sometimes it's a Starbucks card, sometimes some sort of enticement to do that. Additionally, even at conferences that I go to, there are a lot of enticements to participate at kind of that deeper level. And typically in interview or smaller group work, survey work that's happening, that's also not uncommon at the collegiate level, research level. to get participants into research information, they do often incentivize the participation. So it's not uncommon, it's just, it doesn't happen a lot at K-12. But I think it is a good practice to be able to get into. Again, it kind of depends on where your funds are coming from and who's doing that. Because we are taxpayer based and not, you know, privately funded, there is a little bit of a difference in how we do that. But it's just a shift from what K-12 doesn't typically do.
Yeah, and I think it's also just a simple way of honoring individuals' time, and just honoring and valuing the input that they're choosing to give you as well. So I know it's been said before. I just kind of want to reiterate, especially because as I'm looking at the CEE plan, it doesn't like specifically name interviews, face-to-face type things. And so just reiterating again, the significant importance of that and like ensuring that we have many modes of not only communicating that this work is taking place, when this work is taking place, but also many modes of actually gathering feedback and input. Mr. Howard, did I hear you say earlier that the ESS or EES survey is actually being piloted right now at Tuck L?
Yeah, well, the relational trust of powerless to powerful, the book that we have, yeah, they're doing the relational trust piece right now, and I believe as of Wednesday they just finished the academic trust piece, the academic press, excuse me.
Okay, sorry, I'm not sure when you say that piece. What can you tell me a little bit more about what that means? What is involved in that?
Basically, the teachers are sitting down and they're naming the areas that have worked in Tukwila and the areas that have not worked and what they would like to see and invest in. But it's them giving qualitative and quantitative at the same time. It's the survey that does both, and it's kind of spelled out in this book. It really spells it totally out. Of why we do it and how we build that community trust. And then the second part of that is to make sure that those pieces are now being integrated into our goals. And then how and what evidence do they want to see? What does it look like when it's actually working well, when it's not working well? And then they develop methodologies of how they're going to measure how we're doing. So that they're doing that piece this year. So that's why it's so critical to get this information back. So when they build it, it's their work. That's the second order change because they built it. So now no one is saying, well, this came from an agency handed down to us and we gave no input and we don't like it. No, you built it from bottom up. And now you're saying these are the things that we want to measure going forward. That's why the conversation of, say, for example, we have iReady, but now conversations about value added gathering data is something that teachers are talking about as well. And so these things are bubbling up, and then we have to make a decision as a district if we can support that. What does that look like if we can do the training and support teachers around value added data? So we're looking at that right now.
Thanks so much. That's helpful. And the book's great. I'm almost done with it. I think it's really, really powerful stuff. So what I'm hearing is they're kind of in the process of that work with staff. Has there been kind of surveying in any of that work with students or other stakeholders yet? And then just general, how is it going? Like our staff, just how's it going? Are folks receptive to where this work is headed?
I think it's all brand new. Some people have done it before and some people haven't. But people are anxious to give their feedback and anxious to start to talk about what's possible. I think anytime you start to build a future of possibility and that hope, it's always great conversations. And we have great leaders. Our leader at Tukwila, Steve, he's doing a fantastic job. Mr. Salisbury, and leading that with his team and making sure that they start to understand the alignment pieces of state, district, board, superintendent, all the way down to how they do their job. I'll know when it starts to shift because the behavior changes from the district to Dr. Herndon, or they'll start naming people at the district. Right now, it's the district, and when we start to hear those behavior shifts, means that they know that they're a part of it. We did this. We are doing this right now. Is kind of a separate system. Tukwila, and then it's the district. And so that's kind of some of the shifts you'll start to hear when they start to understand that they see the things they built in action. So those are the things of that culture shift that's starting to happen. And as we talk and have these conversations, and the big pieces you're seeing that Dr. Herndon has put in place is the learning walks. We're in the buildings, we're having conversations, we're dialoguing with teachers, we're seeing what they're doing, showing the level of care. People always want to participate when they know how much you care. And so that is clearly, we're giving them feedback coming into their classrooms, and that's the first step. So you'll start to see a shift as the year goes on, and that culture shift is the first piece. We have to get people where their heart is first, and then secondly, we'll get their brain next.
I have a question along those lines. I think we have a tremendous staff here in Tukwila, but we don't have a perfect staff. So you're talking about building from the building level. What if some of our builders aren't up to the task? How do we not let that dominate and hold back, and the ones that are kind of entrenched on an old way of doing it, which would probably be me if I was there. But how do we make sure we have the right builders when we're using what we already have?
Yeah, it's not a hard thing to do, but some of the things that I've experienced, Dr. Herndon's experience is, each one teach one. And so one of the things we could do is, as an example, we kind of chuckle about this, but now we're of that age, and it's not so funny anymore. But some of the teachers have said, hey, when I was in school, I did all my lesson plans in writing. I never had to use a computer. So now we went virtual, and all the teachers had to move to a computer, and that was a big shift. And so in doing that change, that just lets you know that change isn't happening fast enough. But what worked is other teachers teaching other teachers helping each other, other teachers saying, hey, it's not so bad here, and let me show you how to do that. Or, well, I trust Jan, so if Jan is doing it and Jan's talking to me, then maybe I'll talk to Dave, or maybe I'll talk to Edna now that I see that Jan's doing it. And that's what we know works. And so that's kind of a strategy to kind of move people along. But we have to be really, really careful that we don't do what we normally do. We have a idea that you should be moving 3 grades in this 1 year. We have to be careful because these are adults. And as we provide that opportunity, we just have to provide it multiple ways. Sometimes we get into that quantitative piece. And so only 10 people showed up. Well, we want to make sure we honor those 10 people that showed up. And then we want to provide multiple ways for people to show up. And so maybe it's on a Saturday, maybe it's during the day, maybe it's during, after school. Dr. Herndon has said this to me after looking at the COVID. He says, we have to take a look at how we do PD, and trying to get subs and make changes probably won't be the way of the future. The way of the future may be us doing this Zooms like we're doing right now to get more people involved, because now we don't have to pay for someone to come from Arizona or from New York to come all the way here. We'll probably do it at Zoom, and we'll probably have to do it during the daytime because we won't be able to get subs. And so as that is being planted in my brain, listening to him talk, I'm trying to plan how that will be put into practice. So some of those things like that, I know are continuously being talked about, and changes have to be made. But you're right, we're going to get to a tipping point for that to happen. We will never get to 100%, but if we can get to 70, 75%, we'll start to make a difference in each one of our buildings.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm even thinking about the strategic planning and getting community feedback and being able to do it virtually, right? Like
Yeah.
possibly or something like that. I also am thinking about, so this is just, whenever we're looking at plans, also thinking about that communication to the community once we've put something together, and how will the community know what the product is, what we're going to do, how are we going to, and we don't have to do that in this meeting, of course, and I would just leave it to the direction of Dr. Hernan and Mr. Howard to sort of be formulating, because that piece I also would want to know. So regardless of how well this team, whatever organization we end up picking is going to do that, if we're not already being intentional and how we're going to continue like what you were saying, Mr. Howard, continue the conversation to keep talking about what, this is what we've done in this year, here we are, this is what we're prepping to do for next year, and how that will happen. And that would be something I'd be very interested in, because that's also a piece that in our community is something that we need to build upon. We really do need to improve that piece of it.
Yeah, I would say that's also part of once we have this solidified, whoever we're working with, is during that process of them getting feedback is also asking how people want to be followed up with. So I think that's just part of the process to say, what's the best way for you to know about the progress that we're making or any of the follow-up pieces. So I would just make sure that once we've identified whoever we're working with, that they can, through the process, ask those questions about what's the best way to get follow-up with you.
And if we look under F, where it says community equity focus, you'll see that CEE and Red Frog were the two firms that said that they could do one-on-one, they could do qualitative and quantitative supports, and had the capability of doing that, written surveys and one-on-one interviews. They said they had the capacity to do that, which was Red Frog and CEE.
Any other feedback or questions for Mr. Howard, Dr. Herndon?
So just a process question. We don't make a recommendation today. We wait until Tuesday. Is that true? Or do we vote on this today?
I think, let's see, it's not in the action items, but you can, because you're not approving, you basically from the direction, if you're in agreement with the recommendation, or if you have a different, if you as a group are interested in one of the other two, then we would bring the actual contract to you on Tuesday to vote on. So we don't have that because these are just the proposals. So based on whatever the feedback is, if you agree with the recommendation, great, we'll get the actual proposal to you ready for the board meeting for the 13th, 14th. And then that way you can vote on that actual contract.
Well, then I would invite us to entertain moving forward with CEE. I think you've done a great job of answering our questions and getting all of the process in front of us. Yeah, hearing you talk about it makes me much more comfortable after our last conversation. So I would move that to the agenda for Tuesday and open that up for conversation with the other directors.
Yeah, I guess I think Mr. Howard's done a great job of researching this thoroughly, and I'm good with the recommendation.
I support the recommendation.
Same.
Me also.
All right.
Great. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Mr. Howard and team have done a great job in collecting and comparing. I think the memo itself on the comparisons like that, I think it's a great model for you to see during board meetings so that you can see that we've gone through a lot of these pieces it's just hopefully a little bit easier to compare them. So that's great. And we'll get this in shape for an actual approval item for the next board meeting.
All right. We'll go ahead
Good
and
job.
move on. to
Good job,
action.
Mr. Howard. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. All right, so item 4, action items, approval resolution 919, certification of 2022 excess property taxes.
Yeah, so basically in front of you is what happens. The reason why this is here and the reason why it's for a Saturday is because this action had to be done by Monday. We found out from the King County Assessor's Office. So when school districts go out for levies, no matter what they are, when you put a levy on a ballot, you put it for a particular amount of money, not a rate. But the way it gets calculated is, let's say you're collecting $1 million a year for 4 years, it does break down to a rate. The way you collect that is, it's a rate based on property valuation. And it's a certain rate per 1,000 of assessed value. But each year, the assessor's office recalculates the value of property. And so the rate can change. It can go up, it can go down. So typically what happens is as the value of properties go up, the rate goes down. It's an inverse relationship. Additionally, if there is more commercial property that's developed, we collect taxes off of the commercial property and it lowers the rate for homeowner property. So in that process, because you go out for a certain amount, $1 million a year, but the rate is set from the previous year's assessed valuation, you can actually collect more money than you were supposed to in a year. We don't get to keep that excess money. So we have to refund that back to taxpayers. Additionally, or I should say, additionally for clarification, if the valuation of property were to go down, we would actually have to collect more, in which case property owners probably wouldn't be very happy, but we've said, hey, we're collecting $1 million. We thought it was going to be 50 cents per $1,000 of assessed valuation. It actually needs to be 52 cents. So that extra 2 cents calculated by the value of your property. So anyway, this resolution basically says we collected more than we needed to meet our per year collection, and we're refunding that back to property owners.
All right,
So
we
I guess I have
can we
a,
do the motion to approve.
okay,
So moved.
Yeah. Second.
Second,
All right, now we can discuss. Go for it, Dave.
so I guess, so are we, let's see, collected in calendar year 2022. So you're saying we collected, excuse me, more money in 2021, or will collect more money than we were entitled to based on the $2,500 per student. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so this is the local levy that
Right,
we put out
right.
there. Yeah. So it was more than we said, we would collect X amount this year, and we actually collected more than that. So, we have to refund it back.
And was that the reason we did that was, I mean, since this is now all based on a per student basis, is it because we had less students than we estimated? No.
I don't believe so. I think it's just directly tied to the property valuations. Increase since the property values all increased, we collected more because it was the rate per value, and since the value went up, we're just like, oh, that's great. But sometimes people who are critical of school levies will say, oh, they just get to keep all that money. We don't. We have to refund it. Yeah.
Okay, and so it's because the value of the property obviously has gone up as, you
Yeah.
know, residential and commercial, and then they have to cut back the rates. Okay, so this, yeah, in some sense, I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking, should we communicate this to, I mean, basically what we're saying is taxpayers were, I mean, is King County gonna cut checks to people, or are they just
Yeah.
gonna lower the rate for next year?
No, they see a refund and then they will adjust the rate next year based on the whatever the latest property valuation is. So property owners next year should see a lower rate. And my guess is it's both a combination of increased property valuation and additional commercial property coming online. So new hotels, whatever they may be, you know, things that are down in the South Center area. And if the property valuation for instance, South Center goes up, that's good for homeowners because they're not bearing as much of the weight for the levy.
Okay, and it's not just, yeah, the property taxes, I mean, it's not just schools, there's other things
No.
that property tax get collected
Yeah.
for. Okay, all right. Okay,
All right, we've got a motion and a second to approve resolution 9199 certificate 2022 excess property taxes. All in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? All right. We'll move along to adjourn. May I get a motion?
So moved.
Okay.
All right. I will see y'all soon.
Great. Thank you so much,
Work,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night, or good, I think
Yeah.
it's good night. I have a lot of work to do. I have a lot of grading to do this
We
weekend.
got some
so-
cookies to eat.
Oh my gosh, yes, and bake. All right. See you
All
all
right.
soon. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Herndon.
You're welcome.
Aye.